AI is cutting about 17% of job postings in automation-heavy roles, while increasing demand by about 22% in positions that benefit from human-AI collaboration. When you drill into the distribution, it is brutal. Workers aged 22 to 25 in AI-exposed occupations have actually seen a 13% employment decline since 2022. A lot of the jobs that they've been told to train for just don't exist anymore.
I think the moral of the story is you got to hop on the AI train.
There's going to be a 4.5 multiplier in terms of what they can stand to make in the workforce.
Wow. I might need to rethink what I'm doing for work.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Slow Takes. I'm Sam Illingworth from Slow AI, and I'm joined by my colleague.
Hello, I am Lior from Exploring ChatGPT.
So I guess the broad theme of this episode is like who gets the gains. And for me, the biggest story this week was one that came out of a Harvard Business Review report. And basically, Harvard Business School had a study that analyzed most US job postings from 2019 to early 2025. And what it found is that AI is cutting about 17% of job postings in automation heavy roles, while increasing demand by about 22% in positions that benefit from human AI collaboration. So if you look at just the numbers, it's the argument of AI will create more jobs than it destroys is technically surviving in the aggregate. But when you drill into the distribution, it is brutal. So massively, the number of people losing their jobs through AI automation is hugely disproportionate towards women, towards elder people, towards more highly educated people, and towards more well-paid people. What we see is that workers aged 22 to 25 in AI-exposed occupations have actually seen a 13% employment decline since 2022. So what this means is that even though theoretically some AI is creating more jobs, it's massively misdistributed. And what we're finding is that people that are entering the workforce, a lot of the jobs that they've been told to train for over the past 5, 7, 9 years of their education just don't exist anymore. So I thought this was a really interesting study, extremely thorough and well conducted, with serious implications for not just the US workforce where this took place, but globally as well. Yeah, would love to hear your take on that, Leo.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great topic. A lot of people see all the job loss going on, and it is concerning. I think especially like junior software engineer level jobs getting cut, as well as, like you said, women, and I think people that are probably in their 50s range to that kind of age range. Maybe they have less experience working with AI. Maybe they have no experience. I think the moral of the story is you got to hop on the AI train. That's my opinion. I think also you mentioned in this topic that there's a 4.5 times income gap between people that have AI skills versus not. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what the study found, that basically people who have AI skills versus those who don't, potentially there's going to be a 4.5 multiplier in terms of that, I guess, what they can stand to make in the workforce.
Wow. I might need to rethink what I'm doing for work. Yeah, I could put it on my resume. I haven't had to use a resume in a while, but yeah.
And I think you make a great point in terms of, there's that great saying as, when is too late? Like, when should you have started? In 2022, that was the best time to have started using AI. The second best time is now. And again, Leo and I use AI in a lot of our work, and like obviously in our Substack. And certainly I'm advocating for not just using it blindly, but having those skills and that tool set is absolutely essential now. It's not being able to use email was 15, 20 years ago. Like, we're in that same position now. The thing that I also find really interesting, that I'd really advise people for, again, without being hyperbolic, is think about your job now. And I always think, make a list of all of the things that you do that AI could technically do instead. And then make a list of those elements of your job that AI could never do. And what you find is those lists, I think those two lists, the first one, normally quite technical things, like could be database management, could be managing client portfolios, could be tracking shares. The second thing is stuff like human interaction, emotional intelligence, empathy, knowing which members of your team work with other members of the team, knowing details of a certain client that you've got that you've been working with for 20 years. They are the invisible elements of your job that will never be able to be replaced by AI. And when you make those two lists, what it does is it helps you better understand how important you are to your company. And also, if you ever have that conversation where somebody comes in and says, we're making job cuts because of AI, you can then give them that list to demonstrate why you should not be part of that redundancy. So, as Leo says, jump on AI now, yes, but also now is the time to basically make sure you understand what can and cannot be automated. So Mars has asked what Harvard study you reference. I'll put it in the links to the show notes as well. But this is from one that was done by Anna Elena Aspupura on the 4th of March, 2026, called How AI is Changing the Labor Market. And that came out of the Harvard Business Review. It's behind a paywall, so I'll try to link to one that isn't as well. And then, yeah, as annotated memory puts, from what I know, only about 10% of the entire world is using AI in any capacity. This is a great point. Like, obviously, not everyone's using AI, and we exist on East Coast of US. I'm in the UK. We both exist in a bubble to some extent where most of the people we know are using AI. But that also means that we work in countries where a lot of the people are using AI, or where certainly those industries are. So that's why we need to be really careful of it as well. Um, and then Diamantino just says, in the tech world, we knew this time would come, but we still believe it hasn't fully arrived. What we're seeing is companies using AI to replace people, increase profits, and reduce operational costs. And Leo and I have talked about this in the past as well. Oftentimes, like we see at Block and other companies and Amazon, people sometimes use AI as an excuse to get rid of a workforce that was maybe overinflated as well in the first place.
Yeah. Just comment on that. It goes back to our not our previous stream. We've done a lot of streams already, Sam. So yeah, short-term reward, long-term risk. They're cutting expenses. Wall Street's rewarding them. Mid to long-term risk, which doesn't have to be that long-term with how fast things are moving, is I think it's going to negatively impact their growth. And actually, our next topic rolls into this pretty well, which Sam will pull us into. And my last point on this is I don't think that we can possibly imagine the job creation on the other side of this. It's the same thing with the internet, except this is a much bigger impact on humanity.
Definitely. And things are rapidly changing. Remember, like 2024, it was going to be prompt engineering is the job for you. That job's redundant now, right? So I think upskill yourself in AI, understand your role as an individual. And I say this all the time, but the biggest skill that will be the most profitable or like most employable skill is that translation between human and machine, translation between hardware and wetware. And that's what you need to be doing and making a list and thinking about that going forward. So yeah, our next topic then is there's this really interesting study that basically AI made you faster, your employer kept the time. So there's so much work going on at the moment. People talking about the fact that AI is reducing the amount of time it takes to do things. So there was AES looked at, and which is an energy company, a 14-day, what would have a 14-day audit now they can do in 1 hour. Now, the problem is that a lot of these technical skills, the amount of time that it takes is being hugely reduced. But what that means is, let's say you have a very technical job. What would have taken you 8 hours to do the technical side of things, you could maybe do in one, maybe. It changes on people and location. But then there's something called Parkinson's law, which people may or may not be aware of. But Parkinson's law basically states that work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. What that basically means is if you're employed by someone and you're able to do 8 hours work in 1 hour and they know that, they will give you another 7 hours work. So I think this is a really interesting topic for multiple reasons that I'll get into later, but that's the kind of take that basically AI is reducing the amount of work the amount of time that's needed to do tasks, but our employers, if we're employed, are cottoning onto that fact and giving us more and more work, which is leading to huge amounts of mental fatigue as well in the workplace. So yeah, Leo, I just wondered what your take was on that.
Yeah. Let's get into the numbers here a little bit. It's 14-day audit compressed into 1 hour. Is that what we have?
Yeah.
That is absolutely insane. Maybe that's an edge case. I'm sure it depends on what type of work you're doing. I'm sure there's some work where maybe 2 hours is compressed to 1 hour or 8 hours is compressed to 1 hour, and not 14 days to 1 hour is incredible. So I took these numbers and just gave an example. I think this would still be maybe an edge case. Let's say a normal 9 to 5, which is an 8-hour workday, could be compressed into 1 hour. Effectively, that would mean that, let's say you have a big company with 1,000 employees. Those 1,000 employees now have the execution power of 8,000 employees. So it
Wow.
goes back to this thing where it's, instead of firing people, realize we have to build with these people, teach them how to use AI, learn to use it correctly. Even, I think Diamanto mentioned 10% of the population. 10% of the population might be using AI, but what percentage of that 10% is using it correctly and actually learning through the process of using AI instead of just input, output?
A great take,
So
man.
yeah, AI raises the bar of what's expected of you, but I think that's actually a good thing for the workforce and for the companies that actually implement this training correctly, especially in junior level positions.
And I think it comes back to this has been going on for, it predates AI, right? So the economist John Maynard Keynes, sorry, in the 1930s, I think, he basically predicted that by 2030, a 15-hour work week would be possible because things would be automated, which is an amazing prediction, by the way. Like if you take took place almost 100 years ago. Um, and it's true. I talk a lot about universal basic income. So this idea that theoretically a lot of jobs could be automated or a lot of the tasks could be automated. So what does that do? That theoretically frees up people's free time to do other things, right? To create culture, to spend time with their families, to enjoy nature, to be activists, to be humans. And this is why it transcends AI in a way, because there's this amazing opportunity to use this technology to free ourselves from the burden of work. Like a lot of jobs will need to exist as they stand, but why are we not exploring that rather than thinking what we can do is we can fill that redundant like 25 hours with more work and more work and more work. And that's why I think what you're saying about using AI smartly is so true. Like not just for our employees, but employers, but for ourselves as well. And I also think this ties into what we're seeing more and more, especially with Gen Z, is that traditional 9 to 5 and even working for an employer is going away now. And a lot more people are becoming solopreneurs or working like multiple jobs, be that through Fiverr, be that through Substack, like multiple revenue streams where they can control the amount of output that they have, which I think is really interesting. And again, points to this whole narrative that subsedes AI. And again, it comes back to the pandemic for me, because there were lots of things that happened in the pandemic where we probably realized that even pre AI, we could contract a lot of the work that we're doing. The workforce like just looks different for everyone going forward as well. And that actually this is an opportunity to really think about how we can use AI not to be more productive, like in terms of for our employer, but actually how we can take back some of that time for ourselves as well. So if we're able to compress our working week and we're still able to do the job that's required of us, we shouldn't be taking on more jobs. We should instead be thinking about ways that we can actually just free up time to be humans instead.
Yeah, now thank you for reminding me exactly what you were talking about. Me personally, I don't think that's what's going to happen. Yeah, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think what's going to happen is we live in a capitalistic society, which I don't have any issues with capitalism. I think we spoke about this in our last stream. There are certain things within capitalism that I do have a big issue with, especially healthcare. However, I don't think UBI is the road that we're going to go down. I think we're going to go down that road where a lot of people work, for example, in big tech, we have hundreds of thousands of employees. I think that their workload is just going to be increased so that they can basically have a multiplier effect per employee. That's my personal opinion. Is not that some people will have more free time depending on what they're doing, but I think the majority case will be that actually people will still be working the same hours, just doing more.
Exactly. And I think it's going to be really interesting in countries that have unions as well, what that looks like and what that looks like going forward. And again, really important to think about fatigue, like not just fatigue of and being burnt out, but also that real worry. Going back to the first point we had, there's a lot of fatigue that people face in terms of worried whether or not AI will take their jobs or not. So that's why thinking about that broader picture of what you want your job to look like, what your skills are, and maybe how you can translate that into other opportunities as well, like with AI, is absolutely essential going forward. Cool. So we'll go on to the next topic then, which is basically, I don't know if people saw this, but there's been like a massive kickback from Hollywood. So I think over 400 Hollywood A-listers, like real A-listers, like people like Ron Howard, Paul McCartney, Kate Blanchett, etc. They've signed a letter to the White House basically arguing that their work should be copyrighted. And how this came out was that OpenAI and Google submitted formal recommendations to the White House explicitly requesting copyright exemptions for training data. And they sold it on the usual, basically, I'm paraphrasing, but they basically said, if you don't do this, China will beat us to better models and the race for AGI. It's roughly what they said. To which point Hollywood came back and said, look, that's insane. Why would you completely bypass copyright laws as well as the moral, legal, ethical implications of this? This is also an industry that employs 2.6 million people. So yeah, I thought this was really interesting, and we'll come on to other examples later on in terms of where this has happened elsewhere in the world. But this is like quite a big kickback. And I also found it interesting that I only found out about the official like letter from Google and OpenAI to the White House through this protest. So it wasn't that I knew about the issue and then the protest happened. It was the protest occurred. And then I was like, oh, wow, this is insane that they've asked for this. So yeah, would love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I think it's tricky. I think the main point here is fair use, which I don't know how fair use works in the UK, but here there's legal terminology that goes into it as well. I will leave this link in the chat here, which is basically a government link to describe exactly what fair use is. And this is where it gets a little tricky, in my opinion, because they will probably find a workaround or a loophole to this. Because one of the terms in fair use is research. And there you go, can of worms. You got to open it. It's tough. And I think also, like in the music industry, at least, which I'm a little bit familiar with, a lot of the quote unquote A-listers that they are owned by their music labels. So in terms of and like 360 deals and things of that nature. So it's if they're successful with this, are the artists going to see a big return on investment from this? Probably not as much as the large record labels will see. And to be honest, I wouldn't feel horrible if they didn't collect an extra couple dollars from this. And also, are we too far gone in terms of the training that's already occurred? How do we backtrack on that as well?
It's a great point. I think my biggest concern with this was just like having a piece of legislation that effectively says, look, it's a free for all with regards to copyright is dangerous because not just in terms of the training set for AI, it opens up huge issues elsewhere. Because once you've things said that things are exempt from copyright, what happens, let's say, for example, when let's take Ron Howard as like, what happens if Ron Howard then appears in your advert on OpenAI trying to tell you something in the guise of Ron Howard? That's the real danger, that as well as being used for training, it opens up all these other possibilities as well. And you see elsewhere in the world in countries that have less strict copyright issues where celebrities are used to sell things. I also have you make a really good point about the fact that record companies, to many extent, own their artists. The problem I have with a lot of this is what happens when those artists die as well? Who owns those rights? And does it then become the fact that OpenAI or Anthropic or Google can start to just use this to continue to make music for these people? Or that, let's say Paul McCartney dies next week. Hope that doesn't happen. Obviously, love Paul McCartney. And then I just go, I'm just going to put his entire back catalog into Sonder or into another AI tool. And I'm going to make a tribute to Paul McCartney that sounds like him in his voice, his chord progressions, his stylings, and upload it to my private Spotify channel and then try and monetize off it. Like that really worries me. Research is such a naughty word to use, right? Because it sounds really proper. If I see the word research, I'm like, great, they're using this as a way to benefit humankind or to do something that's positive for society, what academic research might be considered. But research is also like broad enough to say, we're going to research which topic will be more marketable or which topic or which artist we can steal to make more money. That's also a form of research. So I don't know how you thought. I thought that word research was really, yeah, very disingenuous.
But it's very tricky. And also to answer your question about, God forbid, if an artist dies, yeah, in terms of a lot of A-listers like Paul McCartney, for example, I don't know his exact situation. I wouldn't be surprised if he owns all of his content full out because he's just at that level. But I think for the majority, especially when you see 360 deals in the music industry, for example, they actually own the artist in perpetuity forever. So even if they die, actually, a lot of times, and this is pretty sad, a lot of times if an artist dies, the record labels make even more money because that news of them dying actually increases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, it points to, I think, a running thread here and through a lot of our work as well. That AI is a catalyst for this. These are issues that have happened a long time before, and AI is in many ways is accelerating it and also making it more visible. So Paul McCartney is a great example. So you know, Paul McCartney back in the 80s was like pretty good friends with Michael Jackson and was having this chat with Michael Jackson. You probably know this about it would be a really good idea for you to buy other people's record rights because it's a great way of making money. And Michael Jackson went out and bought Paul McCartney's like record rights through Apple for the Beatles, which like caused a massive rift, which I always just found to be quite amusing. But there is this huge issue that's it's just accelerating that point. And yeah, exactly. He got so annoyed that he bought the entire back catalogue back from Apple. Apple, the Beatles company of Apple, not Apple, that makes iPods as well. Marlene asks, do you believe that the US at this point is at war with China, maybe a Cold War? Is the stealing of AI tech just corporate espionage? We don't need to get into whether or not we think we're at war with China, but I think what is interesting is that excuse of China's going to beat us or Russia's going to beat us or one of the global agents who we are not allies with is going to beat us towards AGI continually be used, I think, as an excuse for doing a lot of these topics. I don't know if you picked up on that as well, Leo.
Yeah, I don't like war. I wish we could all live in peace. Unfortunately, that's not the current state of the world. In terms of China specifically, I mentioned this to you a few live streams ago. I think that we should actually be best friends with them, even though I don't like a lot of the things that they're doing. But economically, it would be beneficial. And also, I think AI corporations in general would probably win the race if they work together more so as well.
Yeah, so I think it's just going to be interesting to see how that continues to maybe be used as a bit of a scapegoat going forward for just as we're seeing AI being used as a scapegoat for redundancies in the workplace. I think we can see a lot of these like proxy wars with other other countries being used as an excuse for riding roughshod over legislation, which takes us really nicely into the next story. And yeah, thanks to Leo for like suggesting the through for because it makes a lot of sense, I think, this week. So basically, I think we covered this a while back that the Trump administration back in December was proposing this framework for AI legislation. And this is now basically been not put to pass, but the framework has been fleshed out. So on the 20th of March, the Trump administration released a national AI legislative framework, basically outlining 6 priority areas, some of which are really good, like child safety, IP protection, workforce development. But the real centerpiece, which is probably hidden and probably the real reason for doing it, is federal preemption. So basically blocking states from passing their own AI laws. So the executive order was signed back in December, and this is now the piece of legislation that's going through the process. So again, my problems that I saw here, and I'll defer to Leo as much more of an expert in US policy than I am, but well, you live there at least. But this idea that having a central policy that then forbids regulation within each of the individual states, like for me, is anti-constitutional. And secondly, it it basically says we're in charge of what's going to be done, and we're going to cherry pick what is and what isn't allowed. And for me, it kind of points to a lot of lobbying that might have gone on, because we see some states like California have got pretty good frameworks, or a start of a good framework coming in around like AI use and what isn't acceptable. And this would say, no, we are in charge as a central government, no matter what your politics. We don't get into that. And for me, that's dangerous. So yeah, I'd just be interested to hear your take on this.
Yeah. So the main point here is I think states should be able to regulate on a state by state basis. Do I think that will change anything? No. So I think they probably should have just left that point alone, let it happen, because these companies will move to a state with little to no legislation regulation, and it's easy for them to do that. All they have to do is just move offices. Oh, I think a lot of their employees probably also don't even necessarily have to be in the office. So if they don't like California, they can move to Texas. They don't like New York, they can move to Florida. So I actually don't think that it changes anything. And I think that's probably one of the special things about the US is that we have a federal government and we have state governments. State governments do have a constitutional right to create their own rules, regulations, laws, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, they could just move states. And I think so here, I will link this in the chat as well. That's actually the link to the White House legislative framework. So basically, directly from the link, like at the first sentence or two, they talk about this AI race. And I think this is what it all comes back to. We're trying to win the race. And the current administration's framework basically says if we want to win the race, we need little to no regulation. That's basically the idea behind it. But I do think, again, just from this link as well, like protecting children is number one priority. And I like how they put that as number one. So I really like that. The second point that they made was about ratepayers. So ratepayers should not foot the bill for these data centers. And me personally living here now, I'm seeing this as well. Like energy costs, a lot of people talk about what's going on in the world with the wars and this and that and the third. But energy costs due to data centers being built has actually like really affected people, and it's becoming unaffordable for everyday people to be able to pay their electric bill, especially with this rough winter that we had or their heat, whatever it might be. So I think that's actually also a really good point. Like the people shouldn't be responsible for increased energy costs because we're building data centers everywhere. So if you want to have little to no regulation and allow data centers to pop up everywhere, at least don't foot the bill towards the people. So basically, yeah, that's it. That's all I got on this point, Sam.
No, and again, this is why I get frustrated sometimes when people take really partisan lines of, let's say, for example, you were a Democrat, you're instantly throwing out everything a Republican does because they're on the opposite party. I don't think you should do that. I think it's about dialogue and meaningful discussion. And there is some really good stuff. I agree in this framework, and great that they put child policy, like childhood protection, number one. Secondly, that fact that the users shouldn't foot the bill for these data centers is really good. I'd like them to explore that a little bit more. I don't think we necessarily need to have these huge data centers. I think like with advances in quantum computing, for example, there's ways around that. I'd also, the child protection is very complex because we just need to be very careful with exactly how that's done, because not that there's nuance at all, but if that's done at a nationwide level versus a state level, like every state has slightly different, my understanding, slightly different definitions of like child protection, like even who constitutes a minor for certain things as well. So that's why I think there needs to be real consideration at that state level, and also prosecutions going forward. Um, my one thing I would say though is, playing devil's advocate to myself, that's always confused me in the US is that theoretically, I guess if you were a company that were based in one state that had legislation in that state that was overly restrictive, you could move into another state and have that less. So you could see there being the argument for certain high level, like red lines that should never be crossed, or that if you cross these things, we will punish you as a federal crime rather than a state crime. I could totally see that happening. But completely banning like statewide legislation just seems too much for me in this instance.
Yeah, I agree. Again, I think the states should be able to regulate on a state by state basis. But again, that's the way the US works. If Google, for example, doesn't like what's going on and wherever they're based in California, they could just move.
No, exactly. And we can see that country to country level as well, like people maybe leaving the EU for reasons, for similar reasons that maybe there's what they consider to be overly restrictive framework. And yeah, and just a final point from me on this, I always push back on arguments that seem to be made here where governance restricts innovation. It's just not true. Like governance does not restrict innovation. Good governance can actually help to funnel innovation in the appropriate directions that are completely necessary. So yeah, I just want to leave that point. So we've got the final story then today, which I guess links back to an earlier one about Hollywood, but this is much more based in the UK. The UK government recently reversed its position on AI and copyright after sustained pressure from actors, musicians, and writers. Broadly speaking, there was a couple of legislations, but one of them was going to be that, similar to fair use, it was going to be anyone's creative work is fair game unless you opt out. So it was going to be an opt-out policy. At the highest level, imagine you're Elton John, you can opt out for all of your recordings to be trained on AI. At a lower level, imagine you're Sam Illingworth and you've created a track that you put on Spotify, like you would also have to opt out. And there's huge pushback from the creative industries talking about this. And they just said that's just not acceptable. I think we talked about this a bit, like Elton John just called everyone a bunch of losers, which I found hilarious. And it's worked. And the UK government has backtracked and said, yep, we take that on board. We're not going to have that opt out policy anymore. So it's not that going forward, it's not going to be automatic for your work to be trained on AI. You're going to have to opt in, and there's still work to be done there. But this points back to a slow take we did a couple of weeks ago where we looked at the House of Lords as well, which made a really sensible fiscal argument, like I was talking about earlier in the US, that actually the creative industry employs, in the UK at least, hundreds of thousands of people. It's worth billions of pounds or billions of dollars. So this isn't just an ethical or creative argument, it's also a fiscal one as well. So I thought this was a really positive news story in terms of when people say we can't enact change, be it in AI, be it in the climate crisis, be it in any other, I guess, misappropriation of justice that we see, this proves that's not the case. Like demonstrations and like activity and activists work and can work when they're mobilized effectively.
Yeah. My question for you here, Sam, is because you're the UK guy.
Okay.
So,
I'll speak for all 80 million of us, no problem.
yeah, you could speak for the whole UK. So, what, if any, loopholes might exist here? Like, for example, this ties back into a previous topic where I mentioned fair use, for example. I don't know how that works in the UK. Maybe I should have done a little more research. I personally, I'll just give my opinion first before you answer that. I do think artists should be compensated for their work, right? At the same time, for example, you can go on YouTube, right? And you can watch somebody reacting to music and giving commentary on that music or giving criticism of that music or doing research about it, like we mentioned, that special word. And then that's fair use and they can monetize that. So how does this work exactly in the UK? Is this just almost like a front to say, yeah, we did it, but then behind the scenes, first of all the training data that's already been mined pretty much, how do we backtrack on that? And then also what type of loopholes might exist in the UK?
Great question. We can't backtrack because it's done. And I guess it's different for each of the creative industries. I'll talk as a writer because I'm a writer. We have a company called ALS over here, which basically means if your work is used, like for example, I've written several textbooks, if that's used in in a piece of lecture material or something like that, it's photocopied, it's logged, like that all adds up and then you get like a royalty equivalent. So there is a way of tracking that and it works really well, which it's obviously not, well, maybe if you are really successful, it does add up to hundreds of thousands of pounds. But that's a great way. And I think a lot of it isn't necessarily just about the money. It's about people wanting to feel as though their work is being valued and paid for in that way. So there definitely exist systems that could happen. Technically, we know there exist systems that could happen. But a lot of the time, what we see is that AI companies don't necessarily want to implement those systems. They'd rather just pay the fine afterwards rather than think this through. And again, it predates AI issues that we see with Spotify. Who does benefit from that? Is it actually the readers? Sorry, is it actually the artists, or is it the record labels? We have similar fair use policies in the UK. I always struggle with this because I use, like, for example, poetry with research. You can I think it's like rule of thumb, you can like replicate 10% without it being seen as like plagiarism. And then after that, you have to write to the person. But then what happens if you've got a haiku? Can you replicate the whole haiku? It's like 10% would be like 3 words, right? I think with any of these things, what we're talking about comes to governance. Effective governance is not, in my opinion, getting into the absolute miniature of what you can and cannot do. It's broad terms that exist to benefit everybody, that can be flexible, that enable actual fair use. So yeah, I think there'll definitely be loopholes here for people to use, but the positive I took from this story is that even though there's still work to be done, it really demonstrates that things are never too late in any walk of life. And that if people mobilize and collaborate and work effectively towards a common good, that common good can often be realized. And yeah, I just thought it was a really hopeful story in that way. And it'll be interesting to see if the same thing happens in Hollywood as well going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think personally it's probably gonna end up being a lawyer battle.
It's almost certain to get it. It's always
Yeah,
good. You can just see the lawyers rubbing their hands.
yeah, and then whoever has more money will win. That's it.
Cool. At the end of these sessions, we always wrap up by just giving a Substacker that we enjoy that we want to shout out for. Before we do that, Leo, is there anything you wanted to chat about the 5 stories that we haven't covered that you wanted to get into instead?
No, I think we covered everything perfectly. Thanks, Sam.
Cool. No worries. So yeah, there's a couple of, so I'm just going to recommend someone. So the person I'm going to be recommending this week, I've just put their Substack handle in the chat, is Manisha. So Manisha runs a Substack called AI Family Network. It's really great. Manisha's like a parent and an educator as well, and a technologist, and she looks at how to get organizations to adapt AI and how we can navigate this complexity as parents. Leo and I are both parents as well, so it's a really great Substack to read. I'd recommend checking it out. And again, one more time, it is called AI Family Network. So that's the Substack I'd like to recommend this week.
Awesome. Yeah, as usual, shameless plug before I recommend mine. That's the YouTube channel. If you guys want to go subscribe, I just linked it there in the live chat. We'd really appreciate it. It would help us both out. We post the streams there as well as like shorts and fun things like that. And then for me, my Substacker is Window in the chat as well. WYNDO. And basically, I've done a few streams with him as well. Really smart guy. He showed me how he uses Cursor to build apps, to build websites. And he even got into the nitty gritty with me of like how much it actually costs to build these things as well, which is amazing to see because it used to be very expensive and very time consuming to do these things. But now, not so much. So, Window.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Windows. I think his Substack's called AI Maker.
Yeah.
He's a really great guy as well. He does a lot of work building up other people in the community. He was really kind to me when I first started out as well. So I definitely second that thought. So yeah, great. Again, thank you so much for everyone for tuning in. Please do check out the YouTube. If you've got any news stories that you want to see covered, by the way, feel free to send a direct message to me or Leo. Like, we'd be really happy to take them and take that forward going forward. Apologies for technical issues. Really not sure what happened earlier. It was funny because I was just going like, why is Leo frozen? I can see everything else that's going on. And then I was about to WhatsApp you and then you WhatsApp me. I was like, great. It's obviously in my head.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, thanks everyone so much. And yeah, want to give Leo his flowers as well because he puts a lot of work into putting together the YouTube content as well. Just a reminder to check out Exploring ChatGPT and to check out like Slow AI if you haven't done already. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We appreciate you all. Stay safe and go slow.